understand what he was trying to say to them. So again, Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." You know, the problem with reading the Bible is that sometimes when we read it over and over, we kind of become callous to it. It just becomes words. But when I look at this passage and I try to look at it with fresh eyes, it's a passage that's actually kind of scary. Isn't it? It talks about bandits, thieves, kill, steal. It's scary. And in this passage, I think what Jesus is trying to tell us is that there are people and powers out there in our lives that can hurt us and also destroy us. Whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, there may be a person or something going on in your life that is not good for you, that can harm you, that can tear you down. This is not a nice passage, like what we read in Psalm 23. Right? Lying down in green pastures, my cup overflows. Now, all of a sudden, Jesus uses that same imagery of the shepherd and the sheep and goes, kill, steal, bandits, thieves. It's not a nice passage. But it invites us to look and see if we ourselves are able to distinguish the voices and the people in our lives, the powers in our life that are actually helpful to us, and also those that are actually harmful to us. Question for all of us is this: are you able to distinguish between the voices and people that are helpful and that are harmful in your life? Because I will bet you have both. But can you distinguish them? I think what Jesus is trying to say right here is true. It's true for me. And I'm pretty sure it's true for you. And Jesus is saying this because it was happening in his life. Right before when Jesus said this about the sheep and the shepherd, what happened was Jesus was trying to help people. A blind man came to him, and he goes to him and he heals his blindness. Right? And even when Jesus is helping somebody, people were coming around him, and some people were like, that Jesus, he's a phony. He's a spiritual liar. He's trying to lead people astray. And that's what people were saying. And as Jesus experienced this, he turns to his disciples and he says, do you see what's happening to me in my life? All I did was help this blind man. And these people are coming around me and tearing me down. And if it can happen to me, I know that it's going to happen to you. So expect it. But be able to know which voices to follow and which voices to avoid. It happened in his life. It will certainly happen in our life. The good news is that not only do we have these voices that are pulling us in every direction in our life, but Jesus is also in our life. I really believe this. And his words are in our life. Jesus spent a lot of time with the disciples. And they began to understand what he was talking about. Just the way a shepherd spends a lot of time with the sheep. Right? That's what we know when we look at, I'm not a shepherd, but that's what I read. That a shepherd spends a lot of time with the sheep. That the shepherd would actually, in those times, would go and sleep in the fields with the sheep. That in the evening, whether it's wolves that came, or whether it was thieves that came to steal the sheep, it would happen at night. So if the shepherd really cared for the sheep, he would have to be out there to make sure that does not happen. So there is this intimate, close relationship between sheep and shepherds because they spent a lot of time together. And I think in this passage, what Jesus is inviting us is to be intimate in our relationship with Jesus. It's the Psalm 23. We gotta be willing to spend time with God when the grass is green, when the water is running and it's smooth. When things are good, we've got to make sure we spend that time, we spend our energy deepening our relationship with God, being intimate with Him. Because when times get dark, and when voices and powers come into our life that try to tear us down, we will understand which voices to follow and which to avoid. Because that's what happened. You know, this passage talks about the shepherd had a what? He had a staff and a rod, right? And that's what two things that a shepherd had. And the shepherd would use the rod to direct the sheep. And go, was a long piece of stick that the shepherd would use to whip the sheep to make them go into a certain direction. And go, and he would say, go this way, yeah? And she would hit the sheep. But at the same time, when thieves came, they also had a rod. They also had a staff. And they also had a voice. And they would try to steer the sheep and steal them. And they would hit them. Go, this way, this way. And the shepherd would tell the sheep, would hit them and tell them, no, this way, come this way. Come into safety, come with me. And he would round up the sheep. It's only because the sheep would spend so much time with the shepherd that they would recognize his words, his image, even his whipping, that they would follow him. You know, as we have said that God and Jesus are the image of the shepherd, in this passage, I want to ask you guys, is it clear who the shepherd is? Because when I read it, to me, it's not clear. Because I already have this preconception that God and Jesus are the shepherd, but all of a sudden, when we get to this passage in the Gospel of John, Jesus begins to say, okay, he doesn't say, I'm the shepherd, he begins to say, I am the, what? Gate? What? I thought you're the shepherd. I thought we're the sheep. But now you're saying you're the gate. What are you talking about? And if Jesus is the gate, the question for all of you is this. Who's the shepherd? Who's the shepherd that leads the sheep out, in and out, and goes in to get the sheep? I think, as in many parts of the Bible and in Jesus' ministry, I think this is one of those instances where Jesus is handing over his role, his responsibility to his followers, to his disciples. And he begins to say, you know that I'm the shepherd. But now, I'm inviting you to be the shepherd. I'm giving you my staff and my rod. And now my sheep are your sheep. And just as Jesus, we own sheep. Think about in your life. I would bet there is someone in your life that needs your care, that needs your guidance, that needs your love. Maybe even needs your rod to bring them back. And Jesus says, now, just as in other parts of the Bible when it says, you're no longer my slaves, but I call you my friend. And I think it's in this passage that Jesus begins to say, you're no longer the sheep, but now you're the shepherd. There's a story of a Chicago woman who had everything. And the next slide shows an image of the back of her head because she did not want to be known. And she's being interviewed by a reporter. She had everything. She had a good job at a bank. She had a nice house. She had a beautiful daughter. Then she lost her job, as many did in this economy. She lost her house and pretty soon became homeless. She only had a little amount of money, so what she did was she moved into a motel. But she only had enough money for a few nights. Then a good Samaritan showed up. He paid for motel bills day after day one day at a time. And we would love to imagine that this Good Samaritan was some rich, handsome man, right, that took pity on this woman. So he came by, and out of his wealth, he provided for this woman. But the Good Samaritan wasn't a rich man. He didn't have a lot. In fact, he didn't have anything himself. He was a homeless man by the name of Curtis Jackson. Curtis had known this woman when she worked at the bank and had a house. And he remembered her as always treating her with dignity and kindness. So when Curtis heard that the woman had become homeless and was living out of a motel with her daughter, he wanted to do something. And he said this, and the next slide shows him out on the street. All I can do is get out there and put a sign in my hand, or put a cup in my hand and ask people to help me out. And everything I get, except maybe bus fare and something to eat, I give it to her. Jackson said as he stood at the corner of 55th and Harlem in Chicago, that he would just ask people for money. And he has paid her bill one day at a time. And since December, he's raised over $9,000 to help this woman. And he said sometimes 40, 70, 100 cars would go by before someone gives him a few pennies or a few dollars. Jackson said that he is a man of faith. Homeless, but not hopeless. And he's got some words of wisdom for the people that he sees every day. And he says this, he says, I have God. I'm one of the richest men on earth because I have God. Money is not my master. That's what's wrong with this world. Money is its master. I'm out here for a purpose, to help someone. And that's all I'm trying to do, is help someone that needs help right at this moment. And he goes on to say, once she doesn't need help anymore, I'll move on to something else. Isn't that incredible? I think Jackson understood what Jesus had handed over to him. It wasn't his situation. It wasn't about what he had, but it was about what God had handed over to him. He was a shepherd to this woman. And I believe that you also have a divine purpose to shepherd other people, to care for the poor, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to be a messenger of good news to the people that need to know Jesus. I believe that. You know, this passage ends by saying that we have an abundant life in Christ. Do you know what that is? That no matter where we are in life, we are called to celebrate it. We are called to celebrate the life of a shepherd that Jesus has given over to us. A person's wealth, a person's abundance is not measured, or I want to challenge you, should not be measured in terms of a sheep. Meaning how much the shepherd feeds you. But a person's wealth and abundance should be measured by how many sheep you have in your fold. How many sheep you have in your care. Isn't that what a shepherd's wealth is measured by? I challenge you. There are so many people in your life that need your shepherding. I encourage you to open your eyes, to look around, and to be a blessing to the people around you. Amen? Let's have a word of prayer.